There's always this zone like chemicals are here or something. But I assure you that your Wi-Fi is much better down here. Clement, my friend, fantastic to see you. Okay, we love suspense in this team, as you can feel intense. But now we're here, we have a backdrop, we have 2 mics with sound on, and we are super excited. Are we all in now? I was expecting more, but not that I don't think you are enough. But okay.
There are 400 people gathering outside for this remembering event of the dam.
Okay, maybe some of us joined that. Yeah. Activists by blood. Well, welcome to you all. Very warm welcome, and we hope that you have enjoyed just the glimpse of this amazing surrounding that we are in. And I would just like to start by saying that the reason why we're here is because of that. It is because every time we do stuff, we ask ourselves how we, in the best way, can be reminded of what it's all about. Coming here at this time of year, seeing things are blooming and watching, you know, the whole scenery just reminds of us that we are small, and no matter what issues we have with our companies, tech-wise, whatever, we'll leave it outside for a couple of days and enjoy being a part of this wonderful planet. To start with, we just planned to describe what Act and Sync is about and how we started, and just take it through a little journey. And we will experience music, talks, and we will experience conversations, intimate between each other, but we will get back to that. Act and Sync is our Europe in Sync annual event. And at the point that we agreed to have an annual event, it was actually my own idea, but when I came to try to framework the whole thing, I was really confused what to do about it. Because we were like starting out by having the idea that it was a laboratory for the young professionals in the industry, where we could share knowledge from people with experience and also have interesting talks about sync in general. But when it came to after we had a preparatory action program and we succeeded to have this larger grant with 8 partners and a 4-year ahead of us, there was a pandemic, and there was a war starting in Ukraine, and there was climate crisis. And at the same time, where I was thinking how I should try to work with this opportunity that we had funding, and we had a great network and a lot of goodwill. I came back from Paris. It was 43 degrees. I flew from Bilbao and saw wildfires, and everything was kind of chaotic in my head. It was like we are meeting at Reeperbahn for the first time after the pandemic, and I just didn't know heads and tails. I could not see myself doing anything that just reminded me of that we all pretended that stuff was like it always have been. Things felt really different. And I met a friend of mine called Bruce Lamkov. He was at that time head of something at Cobalt in the States. And he was at the board of Earth%, and he told me about Brian's Earth% and what they do. And it just opened up a lot of thoughts. Also, we knew both friends. He lived in Topanga outside of Malibu, and I knew friends there that had to move because of wildfire. So it was kind of a very sensitive talk we had. In the next couple of weeks and ahead of Reeperbahn, I kind of came up with the idea that we created something we could maybe call Act and Sync, to act synchronized. And the whole idea was that if we, as an industry, put and sell music to advertisement and sell more products, we are also a part of the problem. So if we are looking for solutions to be better human beings, better industries in this planet, maybe we should also kind of take a stand. And I presented the idea to the team, and everyone was happy to kind of follow me on my path, but also questioning if it was too far-fetched, you know, music, climate, branding. Today, we are not questioning anything of this. We are all just looking at a world where we all see that we need to be a part of change. We need to change our habits for the coming generations. Even, you know, 4 years ago, so short a period of time, so much has happened. So this was where it all began, and to wrap that up, we have had events. The first one in Berlin, a small gathering, reminding a bit about this gathering actually, but more an open dialogue with the whole participant list. And we went to Berlin to be able to feel, to be near a city that was totally concrete, that was noisy, that was dirty, that was human-made. On the second day, we went to a farm, and we experienced the life of a farm, and it really made a huge impression on all of us. The next event was in Athens, the cradle of Western democracy and poetry and art, and also a very tangible kind of, what do you say, country, city that is really impacted by climate change, financial crisis, refugees. Everything is like a melting pot there. So it was really
artificial intelligence.
So to connect with the Hearth Summit and talk about urban planning and how the music industry was a part of citizens' lives. And the last one was last year, where we was asked, after we co-curated the Social Change Summit at Linecheck, we were asked to curate the whole program. So in November we did a huge program with Linecheck, a very, very brave, thanks to Christoph, conference that has taken steps towards really discussing this. So thanks for that and for the opportunity. Today we are here in Côa because this is the cradle of Europe in Sync. We started here, but also because this amazing environment and surrounding reminds us of where art actually comes from. And Ren and I came to visit in January, also visiting with the Rewilding Portugal team. And it just fits into where we are at this moment, that we need to see the music industry maybe as a totally wild place and how we cope with all that. So I will let you take over from here, Ren.
Thanks, Nils. Yeah, just to add to that, my name is Renato Horvat. I'm also part of the European Sync team. And I got the task to help Nis to develop this this program, this brand, this whole concept. And I've never really been an activist myself, even though I was always a man on a mission with all my works and projects that I did, mainly to lift up the Eastern European music scene and somehow lift it to the European scene at least. That's why I established my Synch agency like 15 years ago and did a showcase. And all of these things that Nils was saying and talking about really passionately, like what you just heard, really awakened the kind of moral ambition in me that perhaps there's a little bit more to that we could do and use our skills for. It was also a time when I met these organization called 80,000 Hours. I don't know if how many of you know them. It's an Oxford-founded nonprofit. They basically talk about how everyone has about 80,000 hours in his professional life, and maybe some of it would be good if could be spent on some of the world's most pressing problems. whether it's climate change or social polarization or AI taking over the world or many things. And all of these issues need people with skills, not just psychologists or professors or high-end coders, but even, you know, you can say plumbers to build up an environment where people can work. So there's all these skills that we developed ourselves in the music industry, whether it's communication, creativity, artists with the power of reaching a lot of people. So all these things showed me to one direction that, yeah, this is a really curious task that we should pursue and explore. And so these 2 days, we wanted to design keynotes and talks and especially workshops that revolve and circle around topics that we felt are one of the most pressings in our the way we work in the music industry and in culture, and how culture could be could have a bigger role and more chairs around tables where we discuss pressing issues of the world. So with the help of some really great colleagues and facilitators like Ivan over there and Gabi, I can't see her, but I'm sure she's somewhere there. We designed a couple of workshops for 2 days where we'd like to pick your brain really with this attitude of moral ambition, and think about how you live in the world, how you work in this world and in this environment, what problems you're solving, and all the skills you have, how they could be geared towards solving our, you know, new and wild territories that we are looking at. And I think it was Ivan's idea to strip away the roles and surnames and come with no ego and no lobby and sales to these workshops to talk about those things. But we'd really like for you to embrace that and, you know, hopefully have a great time in the meantime and share everything you feel like sharing. We're not going to record the discussions, so everyone is really free to speak and talk. We're going to take some notes, of course, because we would really like to collect all the imagination and all the practical knowledge that we might uncover. You're going to get some cards at the end of the first day where we ask you to write some things down, which we will collect. Tomorrow is going to be the basis of the second workshop, so please do that with the best of your intentions. And at the end of tomorrow, or the workshops, we can also regroup and just discuss what the different workshops uncovered. We would really like to get to a point where we used our imagination, even wild imagination, but broken them down into really tangible and actionable steps. So we don't just throw up ideas and dystopian or utopian futures on the wall, but actual ones that could be even achieved.
Yeah, but what I would say is that the stripping of the titles and what we normally do, we come with experience and knowledge, so we don't need that on a card. What we really wanted to do was to meet each other in honesty, and strip also away the panel format, because we want to talk frankly. We want to talk about our daily challenges and issues and hopes and fears. So we hope that you will be open-minded and enter this workshop area with that in mind, because what we feel at the moment is that we are, if we had like a panel saying the future of sync, we would all just go to that panel and know more or less what it was about, but the thematically framework in that is not happening today, because we don't know what the future is. We are all here in the middle of a future. Someone is controlling somehow. We got tools that we didn't have before. So that makes us very vulnerable, but also very creatively visionary. But at the same time, it is controlled by a very few, and the competition is really, really hard, and you can feel it every day. So what we need is to find it in our hearts to believe and strongly believe that the future is ours to create. if we don't demand that it is us that creates the future, a few percentage of the world's that is economically high above every law on this planet will control it. So we, as the creative industry here, has that obligation, I think, to be honest and speak our minds. So if it's far-fetched, speak it out and let's have a discussion. Yeah.
And before we give the stage away to Alex Braga, just a final note about we'd like to also represent the whole carving that's taken place 20, 30,000 years ago here in the Côa Valley. We actually found a company in Austria who's doing vinyl carving, and they transported the machine that carves the vinyls here to the site. So at the end of the 2 days, we're going to collect some thoughts and highlights and notions, and we will create a story and sound design, which is already happening, that will end up on a vinyl that we are going to carve here at the end of tomorrow. We're going to give one to the museum, which is going to be our memento of how we carve things in the tools we have. You can also get a copy of this, but I think it's for purchase. But this is something we can discuss. But this is also a notion. So we will have this remarkable vinyl experience at the end. I hope you'll all see and contribute.
And just to note to that the cards with the imagination of the future and what we lost and what we gained is going to be a part of that story. So the team we are in this room will all be a part of the audio file that ends up on this carving. So we will make history here in Côa 2026 with AI, with carvings, and our thoughts about what kind of world we want to live in. Should we leave the stage to Alex Braga, the most brave artist I've ever met? As you can see, this is maybe not ultimately how we pictured the setup to be, but Alex will perform and help us to get into the right mood with some meditation, techno AI thing that you are famous about doing. And it's a great start for us because we really need to get down into a mental state where we can then again bloom and open up, I guess. So
thank you very much.
Thanks for being here, Alex.
Thank you. Hello, and welcome. My name is Alex Braga. I am an artist, an experimental artist. I've been working with AI since 10 years now, and I am an activist. An AI activist as well. I created a different model of AI 10 years ago with two professors of university, Professor Laudani and Professor Riganti. And this specific model works without datasets. You're all tech guys, so I know you know what I'm talking about. And my specific battle in AI, my specific militant campaign is to make and point out the awareness on how datasets are or could be a big question mark in our life. So my model uses the human being as a real, live, real-time dataset. And it's a bit of what it's going to happen in a few moments. Of course, this is a conference room. There's not a stage. It's just a little glimpse of what my performances are. But it's just, as Nis was saying, to enter the mood of a new state of what we could call a digital transcendency mode. And it's very nice to do it here because Nis was saying that we'd stop talk about the future. And he's right. He made a good point. To me, the future doesn't exist. So, and as it doesn't exist the past, it exists the present. and the presence of the people. So today we're going to try to do an exercise together, a practice together of digital transcendency, which I call techno-conscience, but also techno-resistance, because we're going to perform a strong, powerful, magic act of resistance. And there's a lot of need of resistance in this world. And that's the reason why I started getting involved in AI 10 years ago, when nobody was talking about AI. And ever since then, I started questioning myself about technology as well. And so let's try to enter the mood. And I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, please. Close all your eyes. And try to do a visualization. Try to visualize technology. The word technology. Dude, Ren, you should close your eyes. You're one of the organizers. If you don't close your eyes, everything's going bananas. Okay, when we try to picture technology, we think about so many things, like smartphones, AI, data sets, data centers, computers, laptops, servers, internet. But what is really technology? I had to dig deep into myself to find something that was suitable for my thirst of knowledge. And I came up with a very abstract definition. So when I visualize now technology, I visualize it as a set of tools that generate or help generate a process. So that's my very abstract definition of technology. When I think about technology, I think about that. A set of tools that generate or help generate a process. So yes, the phone is a technology because it generates the process of real-time communication in remote locations of the world. It connects. So it is a technology according to this definition. Of course it is. The computer, of course, is a technology. A car is a technology. But if we, a hammer is a beautiful example of technology because it helps and speed up the process of construction. It helps getting a nail into wood. But if we go a bit deeper into ourselves and we go back to the definition of technology that I just said, we found it a bit incomplete. Because let's think about this set of tools. This set of tools are at most easy thought, a set of inorganic tools. But technology, it's much more than that. As a matter of fact, the complete definition could be a set of tools that can be inorganic or organic, that can generate or implement or help a process that is inorganic or organic. So now this makes us visualize technology in a totally different dimension. Because, and now with your closed eyes, look into yourself. Your body is a technology. Of course it is. I'm holding this microphone because I have an arm, and my arm is a technology that is helping me to produce this process. My body, the whole body, is a technology. My heart is a technology. My brain is indeed a technology. My soul is a technology. We are technology. 100% technology. Not only we live in technology, but we do actually are this This is why the debate in AI today is so interesting. The debate in technology has such a transcendency kind of power, because it talks about not only the device you have in your hand, not only the industry or the latest fucked up business model, but it talks about transcendency. It's an existential, ontological question. Who are we? We are technology. And what is technology? And what are we doing with that? Everything is so much technology that death itself is indeed a technology. And it comes very handy as an example, because when I started this research, I tended to think that technology was neutral. What a mistake. Yes, the hammer is a neutral technology, because a hammer is a hammer, and it depends on how you use it. That determines if you use it good or bad. And a lot of people tend to think AI as a hammer, a neutral technology. Well, guess what? It's not. It's the farthest thing from neutral technology you can ever imagine. As a matter of fact, technology is always never neutral. And that is a very powerful example, because depending on the data sets you as a human being are trained, death produces a very different outcome. For a Catholic that has his own strong data sets of training models, death is the technology that produces the transition between living in earth and going to heaven. For an Hinduist, which has a totally different data set, death is the start of the reincarnation process. For an atheist, it's the process of going back to dust. For me, Alex, that I am a soul nomad and explorer, death is a technology that will help me leave this body and explore other dimensions. So death is really powerful as a technology. And it's not neutral, depending on the data set you are loaded. So now please open your eyes really quickly. Thank you very much. And we bring this concept of technology into music. Music itself is a technology. Music is one of the most powerful technology the universe has to shape two things: harmony and rhythm. This event is called Act in Sync, and it's very, very important because rhythm is the most powerful technology that the universe has to create sync between organic beings. And music is the other super powerful technology that the universe has to create and rule harmony between living things. The same mathematical proportions that rule harmony in music are the mathematical proportions that rule the gravitational laws of the planets. So technology is inside music, not from the beginning, but was created because music is technology. And it's very nice to be here in this specific place, because the very, very, very first musical technology we can think about is not a laptop, it's not a synth, it's not a sampler, but it's dated pretty much the same age about the engravings and the carvings that many of you saw here last night. It is from the Paleolithic. 40,000 years ago was born the very first musical technology, the human body. as we said, and the whistle. People, Neanderthals, were whistling around way before the spoken language and words were born. As a matter of fact, music is a language, and it's such an ancestral language that comes even before words. And people were whistling, and to master that technology determined the status of a Neanderthal. Picture all these Neanderthals around the Côa Valley whistling to each other and alerting other human beings about, for instance, danger. Being a good whistler could determine your life or death, could determine whether you could eat or not, could determine whether you could copulate or not, because whistle was then turned into a mating ritual. So mastering a technology, mastering a musical technology 40,000 years ago was about as important as it is now. But then there is a techno plot twist that it's really interesting, because all of a sudden, where all these Neanderthals were whistling around and hunting whistling and mating whistling, and there was this nerdy guy, smaller than the Neanderthal, was called Sapiens, and he didn't know how to whistle. His body was different, so he didn't have a big resonant body to make a big, powerful whistle. And he was kind of not mating, so very unhappy, not eating properly, so it was feeling weak. And it was in an angle of society, just pitying himself and eating the leftovers, okay? The Neanderthal with their big, powerful whistles were going to hunt the big games because they were eating the big games. The nerdy Sapiens was just staying there and was observing and was like, what do I do now? And he came up with a lunch. He managed to kill a vulture, you know, those big, huge birds. The vultures were not eaten by Neanderthals because they were considered food for nerds, food for poor people. And the Sapiens was so happy that he got his own huge bird that he was eating with a lot of taste. He was enjoying this meal very, very much. And 40,000 years ago, when you got the luck of catching a vulture, you didn't waste not even a tiny bit of the vulture. So we find this Sapiens, nerdy, very nerdy, sitting in an angle, just sucking the bone of the vulture until the very last drop. And he made two important discoveries that would change history forever. The first one, and we all know that now, is that the bones of the birds are empty inside. They're hollow. That's why they can fly, okay? They have a structure, but the structure is very, very light, and they fly because of that. And while he was sucking, like, imagine, he was really enjoying this bone, he discovered that some of the sucking and the grunting he was making, and it wasn't very well-mannered, you can imagine, 40,000 years ago, going through the bone were emitting a whistle. And it's like, what the fuck? I can do that as well. Technology can now make me whistle like these guys here that have been ruling the fucking world and have been keeping me in an angle. Now I'm gonna show you what to do. So the Sapiens is still there, eating this bone. Of course, he caught the vulture, not probably fracturing him with a big, huge stone or a bat. So the bone of the vulture was really cracked. He discovered that by moving his fingers on the cracks, the whistle would change, would modulate. And it's like, whoa, you Neanderthal can't do that. I can modulate. And guess what? If I get myself another bone and I give it to my other nerdy friend, we can whistle together and we can invent a new way of communicating, a new way of making society. The Neanderthals were in complete shock. And that was the very first techno-polarization of history. On one side, the techno-enthusiasts, okay? All the nerdy sapiens. On the other side, the techno-apocalyptics. The Neanderthals say, okay, guys, we're fucked completely. Because we were mastering a technology and we were ruling the world with this. The technology was inside us. Now these nerdy guys invented something that take the technology outside the body. This is the devil. This is going to destroy the world. And on the other side, the sapiens will say, no, we're going to change the world for better because we can democratize technology. We can give bones to everybody. Everybody can whistle and we can invent a new world. Well, it's about the same debate we have now on AI, right? People saying, the technology is getting out of hands and the world is going to be fucked. Or somebody else is saying, no, this is the future. And guess what happened, though, 40,000 years ago? I don't know if the reason is probably for that sapiens, but chances are that 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthal really extinguished from the world. And a new breed of human beings arrived called sapiens. And they took over the world completely, changing everything, changing the paradigm forever. And when it comes to our days, we find this very, very actual. And there's another sapiens that I use to quote when I do this kind of sharing with people. And it's a sapiens that is born probably 50 years ago in the United States. It's called Michael Smith. He doesn't know I'm quoting all the time, but he's a centerpiece of my narration. Michael Smith is a nerdy, not very successful electronic music producer. He invents an algorithm to create songs. Not a big deal. Many people do that. He invents an algorithm to load these songs into Spotify. Okay, clever. He invents an algorithm to listen to those songs and get money from it. And in a few weeks, he takes something like $12 million from Spotify with not existing songs, loaded but not existing distributors, listen to non-existing fans, which is genius, if you think about it. It's a paradox, but it's genius. He got caught. He's now in jail, I think, for fraud. But what this shows us is that we are treating ourselves exactly like Michael Smith treated music. We are taking away all the magnificent biodiversity of sentiments, technology, feelings, opportunities that were flourishing up until the digital invasion is shaking the world and turning it into a dystopian world, and we're turning it into something completely empty and meaningless, where music, which, as we spoke at the beginning of this sharing, which is the most amazing and powerful technology that we have in the world to rule harmony between organic beings, is being treated like an empty box, produced by an algorithm, distributed by an algorithm, and listened by an algorithm. And this is the great risk that our life is taking at the moment, becoming an empty box with no sense, with no meaning. And we should take it back. And we start with a little exercise that we're going to do together now by practicing together a mantra. Do you know what a mantra is? It's a set of words that we need to pronounce, and they are supposed to make reality happen. Mantras are magical, okay? So we have to do it together. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So please bear with me. Let's all do it together. And if you feel stupid doing it, just don't. Because we, as Nis was saying, we need to change the world, okay? And we need to start sometimes, somehow. So I'm gonna say these words, and you are gonna hopefully repeat it with me very beautifully out loud, okay? And then we're going to do it with the music on, and we're gonna hopefully transcend together. So the words are very simple, and you have to visualize it very well where you pronounce it. So to help visualize, start breathing. Do you know how to breathe? More or less, okay. You breathe by breathing. It seems a nonsense, but it is exactly how you do this. It's such a natural thing that we don't do it. But so, breathe deeply, in and out. In and out. And then you say with me, or after me, out loud, techno-conscience. Techno-resistance. Our body is a platform to start the action. Our mind is a tool for militant reaction. We are the solution. We are the code of the revolution. Okay, that was kind of good, but you have to do it a little bit more convinced. I'm telling it for you, otherwise the magic won't work for you. It does work for me, I promise, but I say it very convinced. So now we're gonna do it together, again and again and again. And if we can have also the visual, we start transcend a bit together. Breathe in, breathe out. Techno-conscience. Techno-resistance. Our body is a platform to start the action. Our mind is a tool for militant reaction. We are the solution. We are the code of the revolution. Breathe in, very slowly, breathe out. Breathe in, and very slowly, breathe out. Techno-conscience. Techno-resistance. Our body is a platform to start the action. Our mind is a tool for militant reaction. We are the solution. We are the code of the revolution. Breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. So we're gonna give one last go. But you have to be very loud this time, otherwise the magic won't happen. Techno conscience. There you go. Louder. Techno resistance. Our body is a platform to start the action. Our mind is a tool for militant reaction. We are the solution. We are the code of the revolution. Thank you very much.
I'm on. Yeah, I'm on up at the top. Thank you so much. It's really difficult. It's difficult to get down there. Alex is up 1/2 hour before everyone else every morning, exercising the body and the mind. I got to learn that, but I'm not good at it. That was I got my own jingle now. Yeah. Okay. I would love my right arm. I'm half body, half Ren and half myself. But Ren is somewhere. You are there. Yeah. Should we just continue with our plan? Because that was a lot of words. And we love words. We love the story and the. But when you curate stuff, you imagine what the flow will be. And the setup here is limited. So we are continuing also with words. But thank you for being adaptive to change and making it possible. So we have a professor that we invited that really wanted to be here, but he could not come, I'm afraid. His name is Daniel Norgard, and he is a professor of the music business at the University of Agder and director of the Norwegian Center for Excellence of Creative Use of Technology in Music Education. And he is a very pleasant young man that we had a great conversation with, and he helped us by sending us a keynote instead of being here. And this is also kind of an element to spark our workshop dialogues, conversations, discussions. So we see these three start panel with keynotes as kind of experimenting experiences to awaken us for these workshops. So let's hear it up for Daniel Norgard.
from the University of Agder. But I come from music. I'm what you would probably call a recovering musician and artist. I used to tour, I used to record and play music and release music for a long time. And I was also involved in concert promotion and festival management for quite a long time. Around 2007, 2008, I escaped music and the music industries and went into academia. And I've stayed in academia for a very long time. And I've been doing my research mostly on how digital impacts affect the music industries, affect artists, musicians, affect the sustainability, the broader sustainability in the international music industries. First of all, I'm super excited to be invited for your conference, and I'm very sad that I can't join you in Portugal. I would have loved to do so, but this is the second or third best offer that I could give, and I hope you enjoy part of what I'm going to say. So I'm going to talk about sustainability and sustainable futures in the music industry, and I talk about sustainability in a fairly broad sense. I'm looking at sustainability, of course, from an environmental aspect, but mostly also about sustainability from an economic point of view and an artistic point of view. Much of what I work with is connected to how musicians and artists make a living from their creations and their creative practice, and also how the overall music ecosystem is becoming more or less sustainable due to digital change. I'm currently the director of this center, CreateMe, which our university, our Department of Popular Music, was awarded by the Norwegian government 3 years ago, a Center of Excellence in Technology and Music Education. CreateMe is an acronym for Creative Use of Technology and Music Education, and we very much look at how digital tools are being applied in music education, but also in music practice, and how it affects the music markets. And we try to prepare, or we work with how to prepare our musicians, our artists, our students for the work market that they are entering within a not too long time. After we got awarded the CreateMe, the Center of Excellence in researchers and stakeholders. We have 220 researchers working with us, and we are currently hiring 46 new PhDs and postdocs. Within the next 5 years, our mishmash Center for AI and Creativity will hopefully also bring quite a lot of interesting and helpful and necessary insights on how artificial intelligence and new technology impacts creative practice, artistic work, and the overall sustainability of the music ecosystems. And I just want to also briefly mention this part here, which may be and may not be interesting to pay attention to. WIPO just set down a AIII, Artificial Intelligence Interchange Network, which will over the next couple of years also look into and offer a breadth of research, reports, findings, understandings on how artificial intelligence is impacting the creative sectors, with of course a focus in that case on the legal aspects and the infrastructures. Alright, so today what I thought I was going to say a little bit about is I'm going to say something about how I view how the music industries or music is impacting digital change. I'm going to look a little bit specifically on music streaming. I'm going to try to tie some links between music streaming and artificial intelligence, because I believe that this is where there are some core issues that needs to be solved. Of course, I'm going to say a little bit about artificial intelligence and then say something about sustainable futures. I hope you will get along and then follow it along. And again, really sorry I can't be with you. Alright, so to begin with, let's start by first of all acknowledging that the music sector, or in the creative sector, but maybe particularly in the music sector, has always been really good at testing out and implementing and making artistic use of new types of technology. And I think that very often when we talk about music and digital digitalization and music and artificial intelligence, very wrongly, musicians and artists are being portrayed as being tech skeptic or being conservative towards tech. In many ways, I think it's the opposite. I think that musicians, artists, the music sector overall are very quick in testing out and using, taking advantage of our creative use, but also economic and other types of use of new technology at a very, very early stage. But in doing so, they very often also become very quick or early on encountering some of the challenges that come with the use of new technologies, whether it's creative tools, artistic tools, or whether it's platforms. And one thing that we have been, and we probably currently still are, in a bit of a process when it comes to on-demand music streaming. And ever since Spotify came along and very much implemented a new mode of listening to, accessing, and distributing music, the overall music ecosystem has been, or especially within the recorded music ecosystem, has been trying to figure out how this best works and how it impacts positively or negatively both creative sides of music and music making, but also the economic sides. And a challenge with music streaming is that it impacts the distribution, the packaging, and the experience of music. But it also introduced brand new models of how to pay for music and how to be compensated for your music. It also introduces some brand new gatekeepers. And I think in many ways in the initial phase of the digitalization, let's say at the turn of the millennium, there was, with the aftermath of the turn of the millennium, the early 2000s, there were a lot of very optimistic predictions of how digitalization would impact the music industries. And it would very often look at how the gatekeepers would be bypassed, there would be a lot more democratization, more musicians and artists would have more access to the overall music industries, to the market, to the production tools, etc., and that this would in general benefit the larger breadth of music styles, music genres, etc., There were expectations that we would see a turn of the market, a market alteration, so that we would see the top industry players having a diminished market power, and more of the independent players having a more significant market presence. None of this has really turned out the way the most optimistic predictions were. It may absolutely come true, but so far it hasn't. What we are seeing instead is that very much of the music streaming economy is benefiting the larger, the biggest stakeholders in the music ecosystem, and the models and the dynamics within the music streaming models seems to benefit the larger international hits and those who own and distribute those. So much of what we have been working with and much of what I've been involved with lately has been to try to figure out why this is the case. And there have been a lot of different offerings on why this is the case. The current economic model that music streaming rests upon, the pro rata model, but it can also be the fact that music streaming is counted the way it is, one stream and not per minute. And it can be several others. But I'm going to draw a little bit of attention to one of the points that I and many others point towards when it comes to, I would say, the negative effects of music streaming, which is the concentration of attention. So this is a book that I've used quite a lot when it comes to my students, and I use it very often to try to make a point about attention and how it's limited, controlled, and monetized by certain stakeholders. The book is written by an American behavioral psychologist called Barry Schwartz. And what Barry Schwartz says is that there's a fallacy when it comes to attention, or there's a fallacy when it comes to having too many options. What Barry Schwartz does is that he's a specialist on how we as humans make choices, how we choose. And what he's been arguing is that we seem to believe that the more options there are, the better it is. So the more options we have, the better choice we can make, better, more informed the choices, and hopefully then also providing more happiness for whoever makes those choices. But what Barry Schwartz also says is that it's a bit of a fallacy when it comes to how many choices is too many options, or how many options are too many. And what Barry Schwartz says is that the limit to when it becomes too many options is actually is surprisingly low. And the analogy goes like this, that when you go from having one option to having 3 options, the actual choice range keeps increasing. When you go from having 3 options to having 10 options, the actual choice range keeps on increasing. However, when you go from having 10 options to, let's say, 1,000 options, the actual choice range or choice process decreases dramatically, simply because the amount of time and the amount of resources needed to know all of those 10 or 1,000 options and to compare them against each other becomes practically impossible. And what Barry Schwartz says is that when provided with too many options, we as human beings, we do one of 2 things. One is that we look for familiarities. So we search for something we've seen before. And in that case, arguably, having brand recognition becomes extremely important and extremely effective. And obviously, when you have a market where you have not only 1,000 options, but you have tens of millions of options, brand recognition kicks really hard in. The other reaction to having too many options that we as human beings tend to do is that we withdraw from the process, so we don't make a choice. And that, in many ways, you can also say that we see very clearly in music streaming, which is called playlists. So instead of having to search and look for new things and having to figure out what we're going to spend our time on, we subscribe to someone else who are making that decision for us. So obviously, with too many choices, the 2 key things with platformed and access-based stream economy or music economy, brand recognition together with curation or control of curation becomes extremely important. Now on top of that, you could say that a key other point when it comes to AI and why this is important is that with artificial intelligence, content becomes even more ubiquitous. So with the threshold of how to make music, how to distribute it and put it online, the threshold becomes almost nothing. We see an explosion in music content or music or maybe even just slop, digital slop. This has a number of consequences and a number of challenges. And one large challenge obviously being that every single piece of musical content being uploaded to any of these types of platforms has environmental consequences, both in the creation of the AI-generated or assisted music, but also in server space and infrastructure, which also is a large part of it. In many ways, you could say that the fact that we have all this creative content being available, or artificial intelligent AI content being available on platforms, both this type of content has at least 2 potentially significant costs to it. If we look past the energy cost and the environmental cost. But from an economic point of view, it has a small fractional cost to every single piece of content that comes onto a platform, which deals with every piece of song or track or content needs to have a number, it needs to be registered, it needs some type of identification, it needs to go into the overall infrastructure system that we have, and that has a cost to it. It's small, but there's nevertheless a cost. And when you have a large volume of content, that cost increases. The second cost that is tied to every piece of music or creative content being uploaded to the infrastructure is potential liability. So currently the platforms have a potential liability if there are sides to the musical content that is in breach of copyright. And so far the system hasn't quite figured out how to deal with this, but this is, as I will return to shortly, a process which is in development. But I just want to state the obvious, which is that with the significant amount of content that is being displayed to or being put into these streaming platforms, there's a significant cost structure to it. Even though much of this music never ever gets listened to at all, there's still a significant cost side and a potential cost side connected to it. In some ways, you could say, and I think maybe this is where we might be heading, which is that if the infrastructure cannot handle the amount of content being distributed or sent through the infrastructure of the system, then perhaps at some point the infrastructure will not necessarily break, but at least change significantly because it cannot handle it. There's a good example of how this, why this is problematic, and I'll give an example. I had the pleasure of listening in on one of the directors in Deezer. She talked on the generated music on their platform, and according to Deezer, these are their numbers. According to Deezer, there are 50,000 completely AI-generated tracks that are being uploaded every single day. But more importantly, what they also say is that according to their data, what they see is that 70% of all tracks that they see are that they can see that it's linked to fraud, to organized crime, to being the mafia, or to being something else, who have figured out that there's a great potential of stealing money that isn't theirs with a very, very low risk of negative consequences, jail time, fees, or whatever else. What they also say is that overall the AI music amounts to a very small share of the overall economy, which in many ways makes it even worse, because what it actually also says is that there's a fraud element to much of this. It doesn't accrue very much money, but the money that it does accrue comes from other rights owners who have created it and who are due to be paid that money. But also that all of this music, all these 50,000 tracks that are being uploaded every single day, take up infrastructure and infrastructure costs that the music that does actually accrue money subsidizes. They pay for it, which of course is also a large problem. Now, when we talk about artificial intelligence and how we move forward with AI, there are a couple of things that I see very clearly from my research and from the research I've done over the years. And one thing is that digital innovations seems to follow patterns with some similarity. And there are discussions, both public and academic discussions, that we have currently with artificial intelligence that are very similar to the discussions we had with Pirate Bay and peer-to-peer technology at the turn of the millennium and right after the turn of the millennium. They're very similar. And some of the most big vocal concerns are also coming from some of the same partners, some of the same stakeholders, and there's a fairly loud discussion from some partners, and very often criticizing copyright and the legal structures, and saying that the legal structures are in way of or limiting innovation potential that lies in digital innovations. What we see is that very often legislation comes in. Legislation kicks in after some time, but legislation also takes time. It's a lagging indicator. It reacts to something. But once legislation kicks in, it's very effective. And it very often determines the frameworks for innovation to happen from that point. And we saw this. We saw this very, very clearly when legislation kicked in, when it came to peer. We saw that illegal platforms such as Napster, Pirate Bay, LimeWire, and so forth could not, extend their type of business. And in the aftermath of this, we saw new platforms coming up and setting up with a completely different business model attached to it. And it's an interesting thought experiment. I find it interesting to think that if we look at the phase from the turn of the millennium with peer-to-peer, up until we had music streaming, on-demand music streaming, such as Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, and Tidal, and others, becoming a default model for listening to recorded music. That timeline, depending a little bit on where we are or where we come from, you could say that the process probably took something between 10 to 15 years for it to become a sustainable, which of course is discussed, but at least a default model that completely turned around the economic process in recording music. So if that is the case, and if we are going through a somewhat similar process when it comes to artificial intelligence, we have to ask where in that process are we now? Are we at the start? Are we in the middle of it? Or are we at the very end of it? My suggestion is that we are at the very start. And legislation has still not kicked in. We still don't know what the frameworks will say and what they will rule on, and what the legal frameworks and hence also the economic models, the future models, will be for artificial intelligence. We don't know that yet, and hence we don't know what the models will look like, and we don't know what type of company will be at the center of creative use of artificial intelligence in music and other creative sectors and businesses. What we do know is that we do have to sort out some of the legal difficulties that comes with AI. I just want to draw your attention to what I consider to be the three interesting concepts that needs to be sorted out. First of all, we have to sort out the input and the output. And to begin with, we have to figure out how to license and compensate the works that generate artificial intelligence. And this has been at the core of discussions on AI for a long time. This has been a really central part of AI discussions on how to work out a model for compensation or licensing of training of AI robots. But on the other hand, we also have to figure out how to license the output. So how does the AI generated, whether it's completely generated by AI or just partly generated by AI, how is this being licensed? So how do we license a completely AI generated, let's say 100% AI generated piece of music? But more difficultly, how do we license something which is partly? Let's say that the text has been generated by artificial intelligence, or the beats, or a bass line, or something else. How do we license those parts? And that is still very much in discussion, and we haven't really started on what that will look like. And perhaps more importantly, what the infrastructure, how the ecosystem will handle these types of content. There are some early initiatives by CMOs, collective management organizations, or PROs, such as STIM. Tool in Norway has also started working on this, and several others have tested out and tried to introduce or suggested models for how to license the outcome of AI processes. But thirdly, and this is a legal discussion that hasn't really been so much part of AI public discourse or academic discourse, is what the contracts allow for. So one of the things that the AI discussions is very much focused on is, if you own the master rights, and you may even own the publishing rights, can you then just create your own, can you train new models on this type of content? And obviously many, both labels and other stakeholders are doing this actively. But the question then of course becomes, what do artist contracts say that you can do? Are you allowed to create a new type of music which is in fact competing with the original type of music within an economic zero-sum game, which the streaming platforms really are? Is there room within the contracts to do so? And my suggestion is that it isn't, and there needs to be some way of either negotiation or compensation for the artists, the performers, the authors and the composers, if this is the case. Also, a really interesting thing which needs to be discussed is, if compensation is being given, if we are provided with some sort of copyright for AI generated or AI assisted, who does it go through? And here there is a really significant discussion or power struggle going on between specifically, or more importantly, the major rec companies who would prefer a direct licensing, so that they can directly negotiate with the platforms or with the AI companies, as opposed to having a collective negotiation, so that they would go through a collective organization on behalf of a broader group of society. It seems to also be a discussion of where Europe would want to go and where the US, or more of a US-based approach to this would go. And of course we have to sort out whether AI at all should have a copyright. Now, you're probably all aware of this, but I just want to mention it because I think it's a really, really fun site to enter every now and then. There's a website called ChatGPT'sEatingTheWorld.com, which is being run by a gentleman called Edward Lee, who's a professor in law from Harvard University. And he gives a really good update on the current lawsuits towards AI companies. And he updates it really, really well, both in the US, but also more generally on a global scale. He's also really good at translating legal language into normal language, so to speak, so that it's possible for the others, like myself, to understand what some of the statements or positions, what it means, and how we can translate it, and what it means into the creative ecosystems that comes out of it. I would highly recommend to pay attention to the website or to follow Edward Lee on LinkedIn. It's very interesting. Now, one of the things that I've also been working with, which is in connection to this, is that let's say that when, I wouldn't say if, but when some of these legal issues are being solved that Edward Lee is pointing to, we still haven't really figured out some other issues that we need to solve. And one is that we don't really have a working system for knowing who owns what and who controls what, where, in which territories and which markets. This was something that we worked with extensively when it came to music streaming, which still hasn't been fully solved. But much of what has been solved in developed markets, or markets that have, and still in many of the, even in the European markets, this is still problematic and still difficult. If we say that you need to have a license, you need to ask for permission to use something for the training, or we need to reallocate money based on the training, then the question is, who goes it through? And can they, with some certainty, know who to reallocate it to, or to say, to give permission on behalf of someone else? And it's a larger challenge if we also bring in some of the emerging markets that are becoming a much bigger part of the global music business than it was 20 years ago. So let's say Nigeria, which I've been working closely with over the last couple of years, or China, India, Brazil, some of these markets, where you also have to know and understand and who owns what on today's popular music or today's music, but also on legacy catalog dating decades back. So this is becoming more and more of an issue that we need to figure out how to solve. There are also questions of authentication, not necessarily authenticity, but authentication. So do we have a system where if something or someone says that they are a musician, or an artist, or a composer, that we can authenticate that they are who they say they are. And then again, I would think that would lead back to some of the more traditional stakeholders and the traditional intermediaries who would there would probably be a need for something to authenticate that people are who they say they are, whether that goes through CMO, through a label, through a music union, through something else. Some sort of authentication needs to come into place. Now there's an interesting thing that I fear that we miss when it comes to artificial intelligence, which I've been saying a few times, which is that I think that the really, really true innovation that comes from artificial intelligence lies in the more mundane operations. I think what artificial intelligence can do is actually what I just mentioned, to try to fill in the gaps of databases, of registries, of who owns what. I think that what artificial intelligence or deep learning or machine learning is really good at is to suggest where some specific data is missing and to try to fill those holes. So what it actually could be is that artificial intelligence can be a salvation for what has been a challenge for the music industry ecosystem for a long time, namely to establish a more authoritative registry of rights of who owns what, or a system to run all the different registries in harmony and to balance them out and to find out so that we can have as close to possible complete database of ownership in the different. And I think that this could be and should be something that artificial intelligence and the power that lies in AI definitely should take on. I think that type of innovation is less fun, it's less media friendly, and maybe even less investor friendly. But I do think that type of innovation would have a significant impact on the music ecosystem, but also on the creative sector more generally. Now, the most important thing, I think, when it comes to AI is that AI creates volume, and volume represents a challenge. Part of this I was speaking about when it came to the attention economy and how much more difficult it's going to be to find your audience or to build an audience in a completely oversupplied music market. There are ownerships on, or there are challenges when it comes to the infrastructure on rights and ownership. But I think more importantly, I think that maybe music business and the music ecosystem is not necessarily focusing on the right things. And maybe what we'll see as a parallel development following artificial intelligence is that it's simply too much on data, on content, on everything else. And perhaps we'll see that some platforms will break out and specialize and simply focus on genres, on different types of subgenres or different types of audiences, and see if you can cater something for them instead. And I think this is where the big question lies. Are we focusing on the right things? Are we catering for the right people? Are we providing them with the right experience? And who are working for the music fans? The ones who love music. And as a thought experiment that I do every now and then, I try to do a thought experiment where I question myself. If we were to go back in time, let's say to the 80s and the 90s, and if we had a way of figuring out who in the market are fans, who in the market love music and need music in some respect. And we could, let's say that we can make a system where we would say that everyone who's been to a concert at least once a month, or who has gone to a festival once a year, or who buys a record, 2 records a month or whatever else. If we made some sort of metric, maybe we could single out like, all right, these people we would categorize as music lovers or music fans or devoted music listeners, as opposed to the others. And let's say that we could do that. And my guess would be that as a proportion of the overall market, the devoted music listeners would be, let's say, 3% or maybe 5%. It's a small fraction of the market. I am one of them, and I believe that probably you guys are too. And if we fast forward to today, where music has never ever been more easily available, listened to more, and more broadly in the overall, in a global sense, I think that it's still 3 or 5% who are devoted music fans. People who need music, who love music, and who lives with music. And I think part of the challenge with today's situation is that everything that we do within the music ecosystem is catered for the 97%, 95% of the market, and very little is communicated to the 5%, the devoted music listeners. So their models have not yet been created. We still work with Spotify, with Tidal, with Deezer for the most part. And I think this is where true innovation can happen and should happen. Trying to figure out what we need to have in order to listen to music in our types of platform, or what are the type of listening experience, but also fan engagement or engagement with our artists and musicians and with our music communities. And I think this is perhaps where we'll see someone coming out, if they haven't already, to provide a different type of experience for recorded music. And this is actually one of the things that I truly look forward to, and I think that this is where the next chapter of digital innovation in the music sector, and I really very much look forward to being part of it. And with that, I have to say thank you. Thank you again for inviting me. And again, sorry for not being part. I would have loved to stay, have a discussion with you after my talk, and get to know you a little bit better. If you feel like it, you can reach out. There's my email address, and you can also find more about Create Me. And I'm always super interested in having a dialogue and building networks and getting input on things I should know and maybe should have known. But again, thank you. Hi, my name is Daniel Olof. I'm a professor in music business and
Thank you, Daniel. I know it's a lot to cope with, but I just want to shortly run you through the next couple of hours. This was amazing, and a lot of...
Imagine working.
And a lot of fruit for thoughts. We will now have a more entertainment part of this morning run through, and after that we will go out to the perfect side out here and hear a little bit about rewilding with Rewilding Portugal, and then there will be lunch. So we will eventually be out of this black cave to see the nature out there. I just want to just shortly say that you learn something every day, and I didn't know the term recovering artist. Maybe that's because I don't read enough about music and artists, but a term that Daniel uses, maybe I'm the only one, but someone who is freeing themselves from creative blocks, perfectionism and fear. Is that a normal term today, talking about recovering artists? Well, sad to hear. Pardon?
Sounds like you're using your artists.
Yeah. Hi Eva, nice to meet you. Good to have you. Anyways, you know, now we're talking about a lot of aspects, and I think that will also kind of be a part of our workshops, because it is about feeling good and safe and doing what we do. We should have fun being creative people. Lastly, I would say that finding a way to kind of credit AI and find a way to find out how copyright would be kind of divided into this is problematic. I would say at Earth%, I don't know if I said it, I'm on the Global Music Advisory Board, and we have been trying to formalize a way to credit the planet as a co-writer. So when you enter a co-writing space, you are two people and you say, okay, we want to invite the planet into our co-writing session, because if we weren't on this planet, we could not be here writing a song. And that has been a huge amount of work with all the advisory board members to try to formalize this legally. So it is complicated, copyrights are complicated, but of course there's a way to find a way to come around stuff, and it is important to find out how copyright works. The same thing goes with nature as an artist. Iminsa, you are here. Do you want to join us? Give a hand for Iminsa. The first edition we had in Berlin, we had a lot of meetings with Kathy from Earth%, and they were talking about a new project where they were crediting nature as an artist. And I had a lot of meeting with Kathy and also Emil from Museum of the United Nations. And they were developing this project. And we had kind of a similar idea where you credited nature with with tracks, and oh, it became very loud. But then at the first event in Berlin, we invited Gabriel, that was kind of running the startup of this initiative. And throughout the years, they have worked on this and created a monster, I would say, that Imensa is here to tell us more about. And Imensa, it's already there. Imensa is a global program manager and associated director of Soundrite, a pioneering museum of the United Nations initiative that recognizes nature as an official music artist to fund conservation. And yeah, it's been amazing to follow this, and also really happy to have you here and to tell us more about it. So please welcome Imensa.
Thank you, Nies. Hi, everyone. So, as you've heard, my name is Imensa, and I'm also a musician. But when I'm not in studio, I'm working at the Museum for the United Nations and with Earth% to think about how to make nature one of the biggest artists on Earth. So, to start with, who owns the sounds of a forest? It sounds like a philosophical riddle, and after some very intense sessions, it almost sounds a bit silly. But really, just sit with it. Every day, we have music composers, we have sound designers, we have musicians who are reaching into the natural world, and they're pulling something out of it. It could be the crackle of thunder, it could be the sound of rainfall. And we put this into film scores, we put this into games, we put this into music. This generates streams, it generates revenue, and it generates cultural meaning. But the forest doesn't really get anything back. Over many centuries, we in the music industry have fought really hard to make sure that the rights of performers, of publishers, are respected. We've created these frameworks that effectively show that if you create something of value, you deserve to be recognized and to be compensated. The question then is, what happens when this creation, or rather, if we were to assume that all of this is only innately human, what then happens when we challenge that assumption? What happens when we try and bring nature into that equation and we flip that on its head? What could the creative frameworks look like? That's effectively what Soundsright aims to answer. But I've been asked not to make this a pitch. And so I will do my best to speak to what it means for us as an industry and how we could work together. Next slide. If any of us is to open your streaming platform of choice today and search for nature sounds as a phrase, you will see that nature is quite literally the world's biggest artist. In fact, in the sleep and relaxation market, you find that it's been valued at about $1.3 billion, and this is expected to be about $4 billion by 2033. We know about the use of nature sounds in games, in film, in music, in sound design. Nature is a creative contributor and commercially significant in what we do. So why not acknowledge and compensate her? Practically, nature can't sign a contract. Nature doesn't have a bank account. Nature doesn't even have legal personhood in a lot of these jurisdictions around the world. But I would argue that these are really engineering problems. They're not philosophical ones. This is something that we can solve for if we decide that it's important enough. And one way we solve for this is through Soundsright, which I will share about. But I hope to leave you with some provocations that make us think about what are other ways that we could credit and compensate nature? What are new ways that we could redefine value? And not just think about it as a tax, as something punitive, or as something to take, but as models that create new value for humans and for nature. In 2023, as Nies shared, my colleague Gabriel stood before some of you and shared about this idea to make nature an artist. We listen to music every day. Nature is part of our everyday life. So why not have some of those royalties, some of that earning, going back to the ecosystems? Going back to the ecosystems where we seek solace. No worries, no worries. And he spoke about how we've partnered with platforms like Spotify so that we can have this at scale. He spoke about partnering with Earth% so that we can have creative legitimacy, a community of artists who are invested in using their platforms and their voice to work with nature as an equal artist. Today, I'm really excited to be sharing just what we've achieved and how nature is now one of the top 1% artists on platforms, how this is just the beginning, and how we aim to have even more impact. Could we play the video, please? This is also the video that you had queued up at the beginning, so if it's easier to play that file, please go ahead.
Years for free. Neither could we. So we invented a first of its kind model for nature, now officially an artist.
Famous musicians are lining up to perform with a new up-and-coming artist known as Mother Nature.
And this new idea that's coming in about using natural sounds and giving royalties to those animals and use it for conservation.
It's about time that artists and Mother Earth finally shook hands.
Sounds Right is built as a fully functioning business model. We record sounds of nature from around the world for artists to use in their music. And credit nature as the artist she truly is. A model that helps nature keep growing as tracks are continuously released in partnership with global artists. Allowing fans of music to become fans of nature by simply doing what they already love doing, listening to music.
We have put together a really high-level executive advisory panel to help them direct the funds that are collected through those royalties back into nature conservation.
We launched in partnership with Spotify, the global network of billboards, with the notion that nature is now an official artist and finally credited for her work.
You can listen to nature sounds and actually do good for the environment. Nature's a musician now.
Not nature, man. This is a great feature.
With over 3.7 billion media impressions and over 250 million streams from more than 26 million listeners, nature became a top 1% artist worldwide.
The interesting thing about this project is that we're setting up a very long-term payment stream to organisations that are trying to protect the earth.
How does that sound?
Thank you. We're quite proud to say that since this video was created, Nature has now had over 300 million streams by 30 million listeners worldwide. As of late last year, listening generated over $600,000 that has gone towards frontline conservation projects. Some of them are in the Colombian tropical Andes, others are in the Amazon, others are in the Congo Basin region. And this year, we expect to double that. The simple act of listening is capturing the imagination of millions of people around the world, and it's bringing us back to our connection with nature in meaningful ways, in ways that invest in the ecosystems that restore us. Now, if Sounds Right was a success and every nature sound that was listened to generated royalties, that would be fantastic. But the truth is, Sounds Right exists for more than just being an initiative. We exist to challenge how our systems of value work. We're here to fundamentally change how industries think and not singular initiatives. And so that brings us back to the question from the beginning. I hope I'm moving forward. Okay. What would it mean to genuinely include nature, in nature the non-human, in our frameworks for creative rights? What does it mean to reimagine new models of value that actually create new value for the human and for nature? If we're to look to legal precedents, there are jurisdictions around the world that have given nature personhood. You look to Ecuador with the Pachamamas, where nature actually has rights and obligations. And in fact, there's ongoing petitions in Los Cedros to have the cloud forest hold copyright in music, because the track was actually created in the ecosystem, inspired by the ecosystem capturing its sounds. We looked at the Colombian Amazon, and we looked at the Wanganui River as well, where legal personhood has also been granted, where communities can enact the rights on behalf of the forest or the river, and oblige people to act in favor of the forest, to restore the forest. What does this mean for the music industry? What are ways that we could then catch up? What are ways that we could challenge existing systems? Well, if we're to think about it at a project by project level, one provocation might be, how do we credit the ecosystems that create the sights and sounds of our games, of our advertisements, of our films? How do we talk about them in ways that actually ignite the public imagination and help us see them as active contributors, not just passive backdrops? At Sounds Right, we use that with bright visuals, pop culture language. We try and paint nature as much of an artist as we would the human artist. We embed ourselves in that kind of language. Some people would prefer to credit a redwood forest, for example, in their production. If we're to go a bit bigger, what could it be to work with catalogs? At Sounds Right, we are particularly interested in working with catalogs that bring together the world's greatest musicians and the original artist. Ways that bring alive songs that we have loved over the years and reimagine them with the sounds of nature. Re-releasing these songs in ways that create new revenue streams for nature and for the human artists. If we're to think even bigger, at a wider industry level, what might it look like to go to collection societies and challenge them, thinking about the unclaimed royalties and what it would mean for a fraction of that to go back to the original artist, to go back to the ecosystems that have inspired so many of the artists that have created the songs we know and love today. So, I was not supposed to be there. I'll go back to our original question. Who owns the sounds of the forest? And if you're like me, at first you might have thought, well, no one owns the sounds of the forest. And so if no one owns the sounds of the forest, then maybe anyone owns the sounds of the forest. And if anyone owns the sounds of the forest, then maybe they're free. And it's okay for us to take those. But hopefully at the end of this talk, I've prompted you to see that the sounds of the forest actually belong to the forest. And that there are ways that we could credit and ensure that these funds go back to the restoration of these forests, of the ecosystems that inspire us. Sounds Right is one solution, and there will be many others. But the people in this room, people working in music, people working in licensing, people working at the intersection of creativity and commerce, these are the right people to help us think and build other solutions that bring nature back into the room. And not to think about it as a tax, not to think about it that we have taken from nature, so nature must take back from us, but to think about it as how do we expand the pie? How do we rethink our models of value so that we can compensate ourselves and nature, so that we can capture the public imagination and drive action? The music industry has had a long history of expanding that pie, of fighting for voices that haven't been heard, of fighting for communities whose sounds have been used and not credited, of fighting for overlooked artists. And so this is really just the next natural expansion. How do we bring nature's voice, which has always been in the room, with us and give it a seat at the table? Thank you. Yeah, go for it. So that's actually such a timely question. For the past year, we've been really focused on music specifically and making sure that we have the right collaborations with artists. We're building the catalog. But now that that's in place, and now that the growth trajectory is quite strong, we are beginning to look into sync, and we're quite excited about gaming. We're quite excited about film scoring as well. So if that's something that's of interest to you, we would love to have a conversation. Thank you so much for asking that. I don't always have time to go into it. But the premise is we treat nature and humans as equal artists. So on the tracks, humans get 50% of the royalties, the human artists. Nature gets 50% of the royalties. The conservation fund sits within Earth%. So nature's share of the royalties are pulled together within the conservation fund. There's an independent expert panel that then directs that to frontline conservation. Yeah, sure. That's a good question. It's quite tough to do that because in a number of jurisdictions, you have to be human to collect PROs, or rather PRO royalties. So those sit fully with the human artist. They keep the publishing rights and the earnings from that. We take the recording royalties, 50-50. Yep, it is. And for now, what we do is the artists we work with effectively waive 50% of their rights. Sorry, not their rights, their royalties. And that's what's then sent to Earth%. So it's a bit of a workaround as we wait for the legal systems to then catch up and give us more stature. Yep. Yeah, an open.
Being, composing, performing. But then on the third leg of copyright, which is the recording, where we can invest. I just don't want to. I would prefer a 500% higher tax on any company, any capitalistic actor polluting the world, and have them pay shitloads of money to you, and then you can record the existing, sounds of the world, and that income could go to your judges. I just get a bit nervous that we're once again cutting the pie of the creator.
I think that's a fair pushback. And I would say the assumption behind that is we're saying that this is the only way to collaborate with nature, which is not. Sounds Right was born out of the idea that there are a lot of creatives who have platforms and want to advocate for nature conservation. There's a lot of music lovers who see nature as a source of restoration, as a place for peace. And so we said, if we could engage all of these at scale and make you see that the simple act of listening could change so much without you changing anything, you're already listening to nature sounds. These artists are already creating with nature, and they choose to give back to nature, then we can activate a massive proportion of everyday people to care about nature and to take action. So in this case, it's really more about creating a tool for people who want to be engaged, to save nature, to contribute towards biodiversity conservation. And that's also why, if I may reiterate myself, I don't think Sounds Right is the only solution, and I don't think it should be. I think this is one way to get people engaged, and we invite so many others to build on this or build better than we're doing.
System is already very, very fragile, and also with the AI input coming in. And I feel, okay, so let's also not only my proposed damaging environmental tax that we should definitely write, I think. But what about the AI created natures that are parts of films or, I don't know, AI? Maybe that, because that doesn't hurt any person. It might cost a bit for a company, which is already in the capitalistic system. But behold, the fragile companies and actors from the creators who always stand up for the good cause and should and want to, but the other guys always getting the money, they are the ones who should pay, in my opinion.
Yeah, one more here. Sorry.
Kind of building off of what you're saying. Some of the artists you name have quite a nice like Aurora, London Grammar, and stuff like that. They're quite established, and even though they're not like Taylor Swift, they're still making quite good money and surviving off their art. An appealing maybe middle ground or solution, whatever you want to call it, could be to, in order to encourage and share the pot a little bit more amongst up-and-coming artists, might be to dig into that 50% to encourage other artists that are coming up to collaborate with nature to cover the recording costs from that percentage down the line. So you guys front that, even if it might not make the same amount or whatever, but I'm guessing with some of that money, you invest a little bit of a marketing event, or even if it's a potential like bit of a loss, you know, you're still kind of getting back in a way from this thing that's earning you revenue anyway.
Yeah, that's actually really good insight, and it's one that we're beginning to work on now. As I mentioned, now that we're figuring out where the legs of the system stand, part of the investment we're making is also into the production of new music. And the idea isn't so much to invest in songs we believe will have hundreds of millions of streams, but it's to stay true to our ethos, that there are musicians who do want to collaborate with nature, that their voice matters, and that simple action of creating with nature or listening to nature fuels tangible, concrete impact off of the back of it. So thank you for that.
As Minsa says, Sounds Right is not the only solution. So I think we are all welcome to chip in with ideas of new platforms, new ways to look at indie artists maybe doing the same. I think that what the world needs is that we focus on this. And of course, if you want focus, you go to the big artists that can, in scale this vision within a short period of time, because we are in a hurry to save the planet. So I embrace the fact that you work with established world-famous artists, but I equally agree. I also suggested classical music. Let's go there. But as Daniel said, we are maybe neglecting the 5% and looking at the 95%, and that is what you are aiming at, the 100%. But let's find models where we can aim at the 3%, whatever, and the upcoming artist. But what we lack is policy making, and that is what we are also lacking in our guest lists. They are hard to get to the table, and I think what we definitely hope for today and tomorrow is that our reflection paper or our audio file, our report, whatever we call it, will kind of reflect on something that we might say that we demand as a creative collective in Côa. We demand that we look into this and we discuss that and also maybe among ourselves create maybe a kind of a team of interests that could meet and discuss and plan and maybe go in the forefront of something. That would be amazing if we could kind of make a little collaboration team here, that people from this team that was interested in that. Not to shorten you off, Julian, but we have something going on with the rewilding. We have lunch, we have workshops, and we are hungry maybe. We are cold, so we need to go out in the sun. Iminsa, thank you so much, and also for answering questions. So, yeah.
If you have any more questions, I'm very happy to answer them. I hope this starts many more conversations. Thank you.
I hope that what you questioned would be a part of the workshops as well. So let's include our thoughts about helping nature, because that is why we're here. We need collectively to find a purpose of what we do today, and that that doesn't aim at specific industries or interests. That is kind of a common thing, that we all need to find a purpose in what we do. So, Ren, I need to ask you, are we going out now? Or okay, that's the plan. There's been some communication in my pocket. Pedro is up there. So we go out and, enjoy, and let's listen to some real nature people out there.